but a large chunk of that does come up every year where we take 1/5 of the commercial properties in the village and do a re-inspection of the occupancy to make sure that they're currently to code, that work without permits isn't taking place, et cetera, things like that. So even if you're not seeing new commercial development, that doesn't mean that the commercial inspections and the commercial plan reviews are not there, because the village currently has a program where once every 5 years they do get re-inspected, and so we're on that cycle right now. So it's in the 1 year I've been here, right? So this January it came up and the list came out as to which 20, 25, 30 were on that list, and they portion that out throughout the year to say, okay, we're going to tackle 3 this month. We're busier this month, so we'll take less, we'll do more. So the commercial inspections maybe aren't as visible if they're not under a big construction project, but between that and cross connection for water, those things are there, and we do perform those. Residential, I think, does get most of the customer service in terms of people coming in and wanting to ask a question about a deck addition or doing that stuff. So I think the inspectors spend most of their time on the residential aspect of those things. The commercial stuff can get scheduled throughout the year, but even if you're not seeing it, it's taking place. So I don't know if that helps answer the question or not, but I think if you were to consider an option 3, which would keep the one full-time inspector, make the one other inspector half enforcement, half inspection, and then contract out for additional commercial or additional, even just like reference, for when Tim or Justin are out, it would be a 4.5 person option.
So you're not saving as much, but you're accomplishing.
Isn't that option 2?
Correct.
Well, no, because you're keeping
enforcement.
You're still going down half position. You're going down a half of workload for code enforcement.
So if I'm understanding the scenario, that would be 2 full-time inspectors, just parsed out, 1 full-time, 2 part-times, and then 1 part-time enforcement. So option 3, the revised option 3 would be less enforcement, if I'm understanding that, but 2 full-time inspectors.
Right, keeping your service level the same for inspections and lowering your service level for code enforcement, but not lowering both.
That's my understanding of how you're
thank you.
presenting a different version, correct? Which is, everything's on the table, as I mentioned, so.
And are we voting on this tonight? And the only reason I ask is there were 2 vacancies in DPW. We didn't discuss those today. And in general, we've got that worksheet that we'll be filling out during the budget. And I just feel like if we get to the end and we're at a 4% or 5% tax rate and the board's not comfortable with that, have we taken this off the table? We only have 3 vacancies besides a police officer, so. Go ahead and answer, and then Trustee Bauer.
I'll just say my understanding of back when the position was vacated earlier this, June, I believe it was, the discussion came out that we would try to get this solved, as we could. I understood the budget discussions would creep in and probably, ultimately weigh a factor on that. So I presented my materials in August and September with the hope that I'd have a decision. I realize that might not be possible. I think I prefaced my conversation this evening with it, but I would really appreciate some sort of looping at least so that I can know how to prepare my staff and or my RFP or my job descriptions or et cetera, so that when the budget is made, we can do this, because I can't continue to Band-Aid with the current staff and keep people, happy and or being able to do their job. So the conversation came up because of that, perhaps.
And that, thank you, because that runs to my point, is that the only reason we're having this discussion now and not at budget is because there is a vacancy. And that shouldn't, so the rest of, especially the newer board members, this did come up last year as cutting a position. We voted it down as a board. Some people on this, that are still on this board, were looking to cut a position, to remove a full-time position and make that half-time. So I do think that this is it is something that you have asked us for a long time. He is putting a Band-Aid on. I'm curious to know how much the costs are that we're incurring as far as if you are hiring someone else to patch it, or what we're
more than that salary line, yeah.
So it's not, so we are reducing the service for our residents at this current rate, and I don't think it's sustainable to continue at this rate. And I understand this lends to a bigger budget decision, and may be convenient for those who did want to reduce the position to a half-time position, but or eliminate it altogether. So it's you're kind of in a pickle, which you didn't create necessarily, and I apologize for that. But I do think that we have to make a decision based on the needs of the village and the needs of the residents in the village. And although it may be inconvenient for us to, because budget season is coming up, to make this decision now, it's kind of incumbent upon us as our fiduciary duty to look at the needs as we have them, and not necessarily in context of what we were trying to accomplish on a different scale. So, and I mean that more politically and individually, not as a plural. So I would say that I appreciate, and I think you've all heard what staff is recommending, what they are saying is the most desirable level of service. And I want to continue to support staff when we can. And this is something that has not only come up as a staff issue, but also from many of our residents last year when we had a very similar conversation, although it was the opposite of this. It was, what, do we cut a position? And we have, so that's one part of it. We also have a very old housing stock in Shorewood. We also want, it's in our Vision 2025, we want to maintain that housing stock. We want to allow people to also renovate their houses and have, and go through the process as quickly and conveniently. And it's an onerous process, as any of us know here who have owned a home, and not only in this village, but elsewhere. But, so these are different considerations that we have to keep in mind. How much are we actually saving? And also looking at this in the long run. I understand from like a real estate developer's perspective, eliminating this position or keeping half-time is a dream. But we don't work for real estate lobby, we work for the residents. So we want to remember to keep that in mind. So anyway, I think we should move along this discussion and not make, I think we have a hard decision to make, but I think I'm confident we're capable of making it.
Trustee Menton and Trustee McKay.
Well, if you look at the fiscal note and you add up the numbers, I think option 2 would save us $40,000 a year, and option 3 is $50,000, adding $25,000 contract costs and $15,000 in reduced limited reductions you get from 95 to 50. I want to point out that Whitefish Bay had more total permits than we did. And they did that with 2 full-time inspectors. And of course, the enforcement was done as complaint-based, done by their assistant village manager. So they had, so they're doing it with 2. And that's more, I just, when you look at the comparable places to us, I don't think we need the level of staffing that we have. And the code enforcement, and Trustee Warren was not here when we mentioned, but one of the aspects that was mentioned in code enforcement was alley inspections, which is where the enforcement officer drives through alleys and looks into people's backyards. And I know, living in a neighborhood with alleys, that people find that intrusive. And your backyard is kind of your private space. It's not really, even though it is on a public roadway. And I think there have been issues with the number, if you look at the number of code enforcement orders that we have compared to other places, they're just nowhere near in line. And there's definitely a sentiment, I know not throughout the village, but there's a sentiment in some parts of the village that we are over-enforced on code enforcement. Now, there are other parts of the village that feel it's very essential, and I agree, but there's going to be a half-time code enforcement person who is going to be able to maintain those services to the southeast part of town where the students are living and that kind of thing. It's not like we're eliminating code enforcement. So I do think there's an opportunity here to rethink our services. To me, to go to option 3 means that yes, it may take a little bit longer to get a response from the building inspector, but we are still within, I think, what most people would consider a reasonable range to get a call back a day, 2 days, 3 days after you contact the inspector. I don't think that is, going to give anyone a conniption fit. I mean, that's pretty much what people would expect. I don't expect when I call the service people that they call me back, that day and show up at my door that day. So you know, I'm in favor of option 3, and I think we have budget issues this year, and we also have, I think, justification for reducing, especially in code enforcement. So that's my feeling.
Thank you. Trustee McKay?
I still support maintaining the service level that we have. I wouldn't want to move to a complaint-based protocol for code enforcement, just because it just puts the burdens on neighbors, and it's hard enough to get along with each other, living on top of each other the way that we do. And so if, energy is put towards one area because of, more duplexes, issues can come up in other areas. I think if we do feel that, for instance, backyard maintenance is too intrusive, then we look at the code, and maybe there's code on the books that we don't want or need anymore, just because the expectations are different in the community. So I guess I would like to go about it that way, because similar to our collections with citations, if we're not enforcing things, then why do we have them? So I'd rather reduce what we have to enforce and then look at whether we still need a position, and in the meantime, not have a complaint based.
Thank you. Can you just clarify, is alley inspections in the code, or is that just because we have a full-time enforcement?
And Tim is here, so he can explain more,
Yeah,
so he doesn't have, but
sure.
I believe alley inspections, a lot of that is, garages are oftentimes the last thing that people maintain, so, but I'll let Tim speak as to what
No,
else.
that's correct. It's important to see the back of a house too, because I won't say names or addresses, but the front of the house looked fantastic, photogenic almost. It really looked great. And you going through the alley, the decks fell off the back of the house, the wood were off the back of the house, the driveway was completely collapsed. We wouldn't have seen that if we weren't in an alley. Another one just recently, the area porch was falling off the back of the house, and you didn't notice from the alley as much as you noticed the paint being very deteriorated, and then you go, well, okay, I'm going to take a look. There was just an elderly lady, yeah, I live there alone, I don't use it, I know not to go out there, but it's falling off their home. So, we find out, like last week, there was 3 work without permits that you saw going through the alley as you're checking for, basically you're checking for trash, and you're checking for things that are going on without permit. We're not out looking around to play gotcha, okay? I'm not Mother Nature and I'm not Father Time, I'm just identifying things. Hopefully I'm catching them sooner than later, because it's going to be a lot less expensive for you to make that repair early than late. We're very flexible with our time. I know we put a date on there and we established that we kind of have a timeline, but if you call us like it says on the letter, we will work with you. When I go to court, which is the last ditch effort to try to get compliance, we are still working with you to try to, we don't necessarily want your money, we want to gain compliance, to keep the housing stock in great shape, because it helps keep crime out of our neighborhoods, it keeps the property values of our neighborhoods up. And that's important, because we do have an old housing stock, and it gets beat up in Wisconsin. It's just, we can't change that. So a lot of people, you may not live there. Your tenants don't tell you. We're not doing it because we're trying to be punitive, we're just identifying what's there. The numbers are what they are. We're not making up the numbers. We're not going out with a fine-tooth comb crawling through somebody's backyard like it sounds. But we see it, we can't ignore it. Minor things, because we've been so busy lately, like grass this year, we just didn't have the time. Identifying a lot of garbage that's in the parkway, we tag it. It's a service that we help with the DPW to try to keep the neighborhoods clean. We suspended it for a month just because we just didn't have the time to do it. When I got back to it, I identified 17 of them in just a 1 week.
Is that because you're at halftime?
Well, it's just because we're really busy. And for the last 3 years, because the guys are really busy, I got my building electrical HVAC in about a year and a half because they couldn't keep up with the inspection. So they asked me to get these certificates to try to help out. And then pre-sale, the pre-sale home inspection program was eliminated, and it gave me a little bit of time to do that. Because I was doing like 230 of those a year, and that was like a 4 or 5 hour deal every day. So that was really hurting us to where we were kind of complaint based at that point, and we weren't doing the duplex exterior inspections at all. So that got us back in being able to be more code compliant, which maybe was why you see some of the explosion in the numbers, because it was ignored for a little while, or it was too part-time. It just, we just couldn't do it. So, but the numbers are there because they're there. And we're not seeing a trend to be more proactive in home maintenance, unfortunately. It's kind of the other way, even in the economy, they're saying is doing really well. It's just a shift in priorities, I think, and it's, but it's not punitive. We're not trying, when they call us, we always say thank you for calling, and we work with them. We work with their dates, we try to give timelines. That's just the way we've always been here.
Thank you. Trustee Carpenter?
I think that the alley inspections and all of that is really important. I think that the challenge that is, I've heard in the sentiment from a lot of residents are specific situations where there's a picture of a plumber in front of their house and, the question of, I was having my garbage disposal repaired. We are an older housing stock, and so I think that those things do happen, and that should not be our focus. And I think, having a 2 to 3 day callback time, I think is extremely reasonable and something that, a lot of other cities in America really strive for. And so I think, we shifting to that third option is something that I think I could support, because I think we do have a little bit of flexibility within the staffing level currently.